pray with me? Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight. For you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. This is a sermon about joy. Yesterday, I got the joyful news that someone I dislike lost their job. I think we all know that kind of joy, that mean, twisty, schadenfreude kind of joy, when a person who has acted in a way that you think is crummy faces some consequences. I left the role that I was working with them in years ago, in part because I couldn't stand watching them practice deceit over and over and never having it matter. I couldn't stand working for someone who was accumulating power and prestige for themselves while the people who reported to them, the people who should have been on their team, suffered. And so yesterday, when my many group chats with former colleagues all blew up at once, I felt a mean kind of joy, a twisted pleasure in someone finally getting their just desserts. On this front, with this person, I've got extremely big elder son energy. The elder son in our passage today is the elder son from the parable of the prodigal son. The elder son with the axe of self-righteousness ready to grind and grind. The story we call the parable of the prodigal son, the parable of the two brothers, the parable of the generous father, is a story of a family where the younger son asks for his inheritance in cash while his dad is still alive. Inappropriate, and squanders it all immediately in a foreign land. Shameful. And then when a famine hits and he is working as a starving pig herder, ritually unclean, he returns home hoping to apologize to his father and then work as a servant in the household where he once was an heir. Too late, buckaroo. But when the son gets home, instead of telling him to turn tail and walk his inappropriate, shameful, ritually unclean self away, because it is too late, buckaroo, his father runs to greet him, welcomes him back, and throws a huge party. Not a we're ashamed of you, just hide in a corner kind of party, but this brother of yours was dead and has come back to life. Rejoice kind of party. And this is the part of the story where we meet the older brother working in the field. And we meet him angry because he's had to work for so hard for so long. Angry because he's had to watch his brother accumulate wealth at the cost of people he loves. Angry because he was with his father as his father grieved the loss of his younger son. Angry because he got left with all of the work and none of the celebration. Angry because he watched repeated wrong action end not in consequences, but in forgiveness. And so he's stuck in a field, paralyzed with anger. And his father is pleading with him to come in, and it feels impossible. Impossible to move from the field. Impossible to greet his brother with joy. Impossible to face his father with anything other than anger and pain. I was so good. He was so bad. Doesn't that matter to you at all? I was so good. He was so bad. Doesn't that matter to you at all? It's the kind of thing we ask of all of the power structures that we find ourselves in when, from our perspective, it seems like things are unfair. We ask our bosses and our bosses' bosses. We ask our parents. We ask our God. I was so good. He was so bad. Doesn't that matter? We get stuck in the field with the older brother. We get stuck in the field with the Pharisees and the scribes who were in the crowd Jesus tells this story to. They're coming around because Jesus has been spending time with tax collectors and with sinners, and they are angry about it. They're described as grumbling about it, which I find very charming because it is exactly what coworkers do when someone else at work isn't being treated the way that they think they should be treated. I grumbled a lot at my old job. There were so many rules, and they only seemed to apply to some people, and they never faced any consequences for breaking them. So the Pharisees and the scribes are grumbling because from their perspective, they've been living really faithfully in their expression of Judaism. And that is what allows them to remain in right relationship with God. And that is both their job and the most important thing in their lives. And being able to stay in right relationship with God relies on being right about a lot of things, like propriety and avoiding shame and staying ritually clean. And so when Jesus shows up and starts throwing dinner parties with tax collectors and sinners, and they aren't "we're ashamed of you, hide in the corner" dinner parties, but "your brother was dead, has come back to life, rejoice" kinds of dinner parties, they're feeling pretty angry. The way that coworkers do when someone at work isn't being treated the way they think they should be treated. Angry because they've been working so hard for so long. Angry because they've stayed with God as God's grieved the wrong actions of the tax collectors and sinners. Angry because they've got left with all the work and none of the celebration. Angry because they have watched repeated wrong action end not in consequences, but forgiveness. If I were a Pharisee, I would be stewing for a fight with God. I was so good, they were so bad. Doesn't it matter? And the answer is yes. And the answer is no. Yes, the Father says. Yes, it matters, because you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. The way you live your life means you live always in right relationship with me. Rejoice. No, the Father says, it does not matter. Because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. His life is now also in right relationship with me. And that is worth celebrating and rejoicing over. Come, join the party. This is a sermon about joy. Not the someone else got their just desserts, tight-fisted kind of joy, but the fruit of the Spirit, faith expressing itself in love, overflows from being in relationship with God kind of joy. This is supposed to be a sermon about joy, but if you'll notice, I've left us stuck in a field. Stuck in a field between correct action and liberation. Stuck in a field between following rules and asking for forgiveness. Stuck in a field between being right and being joyful. And there isn't a wrong answer. This parable is the parable of the generous father. And the father promises to be with the son whatever he picks. I am free to wring meager joy from the news that my old boss got fired for as long as I want. God will still be with me. There isn't a wrong answer, but I do think that there are different kinds of joy on offer. One we squeeze out by our own efforts, our own accounting for good and bad, and one that flows out of faith expressing itself in love. One we don't create and we can't control. And we can find the first one, grumbling with our friends and our colleagues as often as we want. God will still be with us. But I suspect we can find the other one at dinner parties. Dinner parties like the one we throw every week after church. Come on by. There will be joy there. We don't have to stay stuck. Thanks be to God. Amen.